what they call it, an e-meter?
Yeah.
Okay, get your email. Let me start that over again. Get your e-meters ready, everyone.
You had practiced this for hours, too.
I know. I have performance issues.
So they tell me.
But enough about me. Welcome to NonSequitur, everybody. I'm Kyle Curtis, joined always by Steve McRae, who it looks like exists today, which incidentally is why we're late. Ever since this entire debate about Steve existing or not, it's been harder to find him. I think he's just not giving a shit.
I pop in and out of existence like virtual particles.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And Dave is with us as always in the back. Hello, Dave.
Hello all.
And we are joined by Derrick Bloch. Mr. Bloch, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to have a discussion about Derrick's story in Scientology and kind of the things that went on in that. So it's going to be a very interesting show tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. As always, I'm going to run through a couple of things that we have coming up. Tomorrow, we were originally going to have the Apple versus Google debate. That, because of some scheduling conflicts, is going to be moved back to June. So we're going to kind of do a beta run of debate roulette. So this is something new we're going to try, and if it works, we're going to keep doing it probably once a week. But basically, the way it's going to work is you'll come to the show tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and Steve and I will have one or two things. Did the ocean just break into...
I was like, are we having flooding issues? Derrick, is your house being flooded?
No, my house is okay.
You sure?
Okay.
It sounds like Xenu's striking you down right now or something.
Is that coming from my microphone?
It may not be. I don't have any ocean in here. But it... we're gonna take a step back from the sea just a second. Hopefully, it was just a one-wave crash. But tomorrow, what we'll do is at 8 o'clock, you'll meet us here like you normally do. Steve and I will have one or two things that we're going to discuss. Most likely, a video that recently came out that we'll spend maybe 10 minutes talking about. In that 10 minutes in the live chat, a topic will appear at random. We're going to feed probably 6 or 7 topics. One chosen at random will be shouted out in the live chat. You will have the option of pressing 1 or 2 to either agree or disagree with that statement. Somebody from random will be chosen from group 1. Somebody from random will be chosen from group 2, and then we will send you a link to join in on the call, and you guys will debate that particular topic. We're going to shoot for getting 2 in each show, so roughly 45 minutes of back and forth. The winners we will keep to do something that we're going to do in July, which kind of like a big winners tournament. You'll win something, that sort of thing. So it'll be kind of like a tournament thing. But if it goes well, it'll be something that we do weekly. So if you want to kind of get in on that, make sure that you're here tomorrow at 8 o'clock so that you catch what the topic is and then enter in by pressing 1 or 2.
It's a good way to
and we'll go, obviously. Yeah. I mean, you hear people all the time saying that they want to be involved in discussions. This is a good way for us to, kind of involve you later on in future shows as well. So it'd be kind of a good little trial run thing.
Yeah, and people aren't going to be holding account. People aren't going to be like held accountable that much for like an actual debate. If you're doing this kind of roulette thing, it's not going to be that serious. So if you want to practice at it, come on in and have a discussion, because the only way you're going to get better is actually having discussions and learning how to do arguments and failing and not failing. So, I want everybody to kind of feel like they're going to be, be inclusive in this. Don't worry about how you look. Just have fun.
It'll be really good, or it'll be really, it'll crash and burn. So we'll either have a good new series on our hands, or it'll be a complete dumpster fire. Either way, I'm down for the ride.
Let's go.
So bring it on. Wednesday, we have Michael Palkovich, who is a NASA engineer. He is responsible for the software parts of the software that took the Cassini probe to Saturn and then launched the Huygens probe to its moon Titan. So he will be coming on to kind of talk us through that. Interestingly enough, he has several patents under his belt as well. He is responsible for the fire extinguisher systems for large structures, a laser sight, and a melodic telephone ringer. So we're going to kind of dive into that too. Very interesting guy. Thursday is the Mind Experience with Caitlin Chloe. This is a guy that does healings through Skype, and he also, incidentally enough, believes the Earth is flat. So you only had to wait 1 week for another round of flurfers. So get excited for that. And then finally, Friday, we have a double header. Friday is going to be a banging day because we have two big shows. Friday at 8 o'clock, we have David Smalley from Dogma Debate going against Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity. And then immediately after that, at 10 o'clock, we have Red Pill Religion. Max Colby will be making his grand return to NonSequitur against Christian anarchists. So, yes, two Christians. One of them, Max Colby, will be joining us at 10 o'clock. So, big week, exciting week. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to turn it over to Derrick because I'm just used to turning it over to Steve. So
that's fine. And, you know, all I have to add to it is, like I said, this just debate roulette is going to be fun, and I really do want newcomers to feel like welcome to come on and just talk about the topic, just see if you can argue it. So, but anyways, we got Derrick here. As you might figure it out, Derrick used to be a Scientologist, and he has some unique insights into the workings and the inner workings of the church. And so we figured we'd just have him come on, kind of talk about his experiences, and then ask him questions pertinent to Scientology, and then get your questions and maybe ask him. So, Derrick, welcome to the NonSequitur Show.
Thank you.
And you're going to want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in Scientology, how long you were a member, and kind of why you are no longer a member.
Okay. Well, my name's Derrick, obviously. I live in Hollywood, California. I've lived in California since, I think, 1997, so quite a while now, most of my adult life. But I was born in Texas in this little town called Mineola. There was a population of maybe 1,000 people there. And then, we kind of moved to a little bit larger city, and then Dallas, and then to Los Angeles. My dad was doing that to kind of get us closer to the church after he got involved. And he got involved around the time I want to say 5 or 6, maybe have been 4 at the youngest. I can't really remember just because I remember things changing, but not exactly around what time. But I was a member all the way up until I was 20. I mean, I was pretending to be a member for the last little while, and that's just due to complications of being a Scientologist that I'll explain later. But I probably left officially around 25 years old. So it was a good 20-year experience. It started when I was a little kid. And I remember doing some children's courses where they teach you how to use a dictionary, and Scientology has these really rigorous study procedures that you have to follow, and they're extremely heavy on looking up words that you don't understand. Supposedly, if you don't understand words, it can really mess up your life. But more tangible symptom of non-understanding is not understanding the context the word is in, which just isn't true. I mean, I know it's now not true. You can actually read lots of things without understanding all the words in them, or you can just make sense of the words on your own. But they're very heavy on that for some reason. So you learn all of that, kind of indoctrination, and it's all in pretty picture books for kids. And my parents would almost use it as a daycare where my sister and I would go study for a while, and then they would go do whatever they needed to do, whether it was work or it was church stuff, like auditing, which is basically their sort of fake ripoff form of psychotherapy. My parents would go do that, and they would leave us to study these picture books. So it was sort of an even trade for them, I guess. But eventually, I got old enough to join the Sea Org. They started grooming me, I guess is the word. They call it recruiting, the actual process, but it's really grooming. They started grooming me for it when I was about, I want to say 13, and it lasted until I was almost 15. So it was a while that the Sea Org members, once I said I had a little interest or I wanted to know what the Sea Org was, just because I never heard of it before, that is when they wouldn't leave me alone. And it went on for, I mean, they would catch me at like church events or when I was studying at the local mission, they call it, which is like a smaller version of one of these big churches that they have.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Derrick?
Yeah, of course.
Can you explain what that is, the Sea Org?
Yeah, sure. So the Sea Org is like it's like the core members of Scientology, sort of like the hardened members, or the ones that are super extra loyal to the church. You take a pledge of 1 billion years. You're supposed to be serving the Sea Org for 1 billion years. It's really just forced labor. That's really all it is.
You can't have commitment issues.
No, not at all. But I mean, when you're recruiting kids that are like 14 years old, they don't know what 1 billion even means. So
sure,
they have no concept of time. And I guess that kind of works in their favor sometimes, because if you don't know what you're missing out on, then you don't miss it.
Very good point.
There's been a lot of people that spend their entire lives there and really believing they're serving a good cause. And I, can't imagine what it's like when at the end they just realize it was all BS,
And it really is an organization at sea. I mean, they have the ships. And by the way, there's a show called The Magicians. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And there's a parody on that where one of the characters signs a 1 billion year long agreement to work for this library after death. And I think that was a kind of a parody on this Scientology.
Yeah. There's so many pop culture references to Scientology. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I was pretty, just because of the way Scientology is, they don't want their members to be knowledgeable of like news and media and things like that when it doesn't come from the church. So I was kind of kept out of the pop culture scene, like when I was a kid and when I was in the Sea Org, especially, because that's no internet, no TV, nothing. And when I started,
highly filtered.
Yeah, extremely. Like the only books I could read were L. Ron Hubbard books. It was, and there's enough of them.
Gold Alpha, you know where that's at in Hemet? By the way,
yes, yeah.
But I mean, that's the way it is up in Gold Base Alpha. Yeah.
Oh,
that
yeah.
Sounds like hell. That sounds like hell.
The Gold Base, they like to call it the onion, and Gold Base would be like the middle of the onion. Mm-hmm. I mean, other than David Miscavige, that's about as close to the inside you can get, and I would never want to be anywhere near there. I actually narrowly missed being there.
Because I'm sure that anytime that you talk about Scientology, they have dedicated people to actually watch that kind of stuff. And if there is, I want to say hi to them. Hey, hi, whoever lady that got stuck in this crap job watching this. I feel sorry for you, but hey, enjoy the next 2 hours.
I would be willing to bet that you'll get an interesting question or two pop up on when people start recommending.
I mean, the other people are here voluntarily. The lady that gets paid
to do this
for the church or whatever, she has an obligation to, because she signed a 1 billion year agreement. So
yeah, it's funny. I haven't really been that close to that. I have a lot of ex-Scientology friends that have experienced that kind of stuff, but they've never really messed with me. I guess just because I'm such a nobody. I don't know, but
I've got to tell you,
cool. It's nice.
I tell you what, Derrick. Before we go any further into your story and how you, we were at the Sea Org part right now. So let's stop right there, and let's kind of back up for people who, because I know very like surface level of Scientology, like what you see in the media. But would you kind of give a run through about what the beliefs are, like what the doctrine is, where they think people came from, how it kind of let's get kind of a historical picture real quick, so that way as we move through your story, people will kind of be familiar with Scientology as a whole.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's hard to. I'll try to summarize it as best as I can. I'm sure L. Ron Hubbard wrote tons of books, and all of them have different like fractured pieces, because he was a very stream of consciousness kind of person. And I actually one time even like wrote a kind of an origin story from my memory of like what I read in Scientology books, and there were a lot of Scientologists that disagree with it. So it's really open for interpretation what their kind of like creation story is. It's not as cut and dry as like Jesus and God, and
that's not even cut and dry either.
Yeah, I know, but I mean comparatively. But I'll try to, the idea basically is that Well, first of all, it all started with a book called Dianetics. That's basically what some people like to call the Scientology Bible. And it was the founding book of Scientology. The reason is because after Hubbard lost the rights to the brand name Dianetics, he had to create something else that wasn't Dianetics that he could sell to people. So he came up with Scientology, and then he used the money from that to buy back Dianetics. So that's kind of like the real story. The story that you hear in the church is that Dianetics evolved into something after, hours of rigorous study and experimentation. And, it's kind of up to you who you want to believe about that. But I tend to believe the real story. So the theory is that there's two minds, and one of them is the reactive mind, one of them is the analytical mind. You can almost think of them as like the good and bad, where the analytical is good and the reactive mind is bad. And everybody has a reactive mind, and the whole goal is to get rid of it because it screws up people's thinking and it'll make you happier. And that all illnesses stem from psychosomatic sources. So if you clear that up, which is where the term clear comes from, if you clear that up, then you're going to be fine. And all of the problems with your body will disappear, and you'll be superhuman with a perfect memory, all kinds of, crazy, ridiculous promises that are when you sign the documents, when you join Scientology, basically admit that the church is admitting to you that none of those are real. It's really fascinating when I read the enrollment papers. It basically says, we don't promise any of this stuff. So what the heck are you even doing this for? So you won't be able to
fly when you reach operating level, like what? 20 or whatever it is.
I mean,
13.
People sort of like have these daydreams that they think are stuff that may be really happening. And I mean, to them, maybe it's very real. To me, as somebody who, since Scientology, has like smoked weed, it's just not really that amazing of an experience. So
nice.
Yeah, right.
And a lot cheaper.
I like this guy.
A lot cheaper. Yeah. So, but that's kind of where it all started, is this idea that everybody has a reactive mind that you got to get rid of. And so once the reactive mind was gone, there had to be something else, because if there wasn't something else, then of course there would be no more money to be made, right? Everybody has a Dianetics book. Nobody needs one. So Hubbard created Scientology, and what Scientology did is just codified the process of becoming this powerful being more. And it basically put what's called the purification rundown at the very bottom. That's like the first step onto the bridge to total freedom is what it's called. It's a very ironic name. The irony never ends with Scientology. But the purification rundown, you basically sit in a sauna for 5 hours a day and sweat out impurities in your body. And you take ridiculous doses of vitamins, but particularly one vitamin called niacin. And it makes you flush. It gives you like a flush reaction. And so Scientologists are taught, and they think that those are sunburns, like radiation from sunburns that are coming out of you. That's what Scientology actually believes is happening at that point. On top of drugs.
So you take vitamin B3 and you become a star.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Seems legit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then from there, it goes up through all these different levels, and every level consists of pretty much the same process. You go sit in a room with somebody, and they ask you a bunch of the same questions over and over, and then you tell them that you feel good, and then you move on to the next one. That's essentially what the process is. It got so routine for me by the time I was like, I think 17, 16, like I already knew how it was going to go every time. A lot of it consists of confessionals, which is basically just where you're sitting one-on-one, you're being asked questions while holding on to what you referred to, the e-meter at the beginning of the show, which is basically the Scientologists believe that the e-meter can read thoughts. The movement on the needle is a change in resistance. It measures skin galvanization, I think is what it's called, right, with the electroconductivity of skin. It's one part of a lie detector, so it's not even a good lie detector. I mean, we have like way more sophisticated ones now. And all you do is sit there and hold these electrodes. They're like tin cans attached to a meter, and the needle moves around, and they think that those are your thoughts being read. So, of course, when the needle moves and they're asked a question, Scientologists are prompted to reveal secrets. And those secrets are all codified. I mean, they're all written down on a piece of paper, as well as videotaped, as well as audio taped. When they're given, so they're perfect blackmail material. The idea behind recording them that Scientologists believe, although we know it's not the truth, is that they have to keep a record of the case so that somebody called the case supervisor can basically, go back and refer to these things. So that's why they kind of, I'm just trying to give an idea of why they submit to these kind of things that a normal person would be like, hell no, you're not going to record my darkest secrets,
Right.
So
that's
they
kind of
got
how
copies
they're
of your secrets out there then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I was underage the entire time, so they're really not that exciting because I didn't even get to see drugs when I was a kid. So
But
I
look at that
boring.
e-meter is not for the individual, and maybe you can elucidate on this a bit more, but the e-meter is not for the individual, or not for the reader, not for the person doing the auditing. It's a psychological thing to the person going, oh, this is actually having an effect. This is actually showing an indicator that they have told me is relating to my subconscious, even though, like you said, this is galvanization of the hands. It's measuring resistance. But the auditor, you could get rid of the e-meter and the auditing session would probably be exactly the same, but it just adds a R of authenticity to the person being audited, correct?
It does, and it also, I mean, although Scientologists on both sides of the e-meter don't realize it's happening, but it's used as a tool to elicit confessions, because by telling someone that you can see their thoughts, they then believe it, and then they want to reveal it because they're afraid you're going to know if they're lying.
How often does that happen?
I mean, it happens really frequently for most people.
Is it like a weekly thing or a
It's supposed to be, so you're supposed to be on a 12-and-a-half-hour week schedule, or 12 and a half hours a week. You're supposed to be like in session, they call it. That's how they refer to auditing. You're in session when you're being audited. So you're supposed to spend 12 and a half hours of your week doing that at minimum.
Wow.
It's a full-time investment of your time, Scientology, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is. And I mean, for some, it's more than a full-time. When I was in the Sea Org, I worked 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for 365 days a year. I think in the 3 years I was there, I had a total of 3 or 4 days off.
And I want to dive into that, but first I have a question that I have been wondering about all day long, and I am interested to know, where does Xenu come into play?
So it's funny. Xenu is actually what's called operating Thetan level 3. And that's the thing after Clear that L. Ron Hubbard created to basically make more money. But Scientologists believe that now that your reactive mind is gone, you can then address other things in your past, because they believe that all beings are like trillions of years old. So on operating Thetan level 3, you learn about Xenu and how he put everybody in the ships and he brought them to Earth and the volcanoes and the whole 9 yards.
They were 747 type ships, and then he put them in volcanoes, blew them up with atomic bombs, and all these thetans went everywhere, and these thetans are attached to you now, giving you these engrams or these mental
I have to ask Derrick. Just from an outsider, I grew up as a Christian. I grew up as a Southern Baptist, and then went to Independent Baptist. But for me, I know that people who grow up atheists could look at somebody like me and say, how could you ever believe that a snake talked to a lady in a garden and she ate an apple? Now, that to me sounds perfectly reasonable comparatively to hearing about a spaceship that dropped people into, volcanoes. So what, kind of take me through your thought process when you heard this. Like, is this something that just sounded completely unbelievable, or did you at the time kind of go with the flow?
So, so when I was a kid, Scientology is really big on the sci-fi stuff. I mean, it was written by a sci-fi author. A lot of Scientologists swear by the fact that, like, Battlefield Earth and Mission Earth are actually true stories, and that Hubbard really lived those. Yeah, so
I haven't even heard that one.
I know. No, these are things that most Scientologists, ex-Scientologists, don't want to talk about because they're sort of like shameful almost.
Yeah, that would be shameful of it too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can understand why somebody wouldn't be happy to discuss it, but I'm okay with it. I mean, it's a little like funny to me now to think back when I was a kid and that my parents would tell me these stories and I would read these stories that Hubbard wrote. I mean, there's a whole book available to the public called History of Man that says that human beings evolved from clams. And there's a huge joke about Scientologists where people call them clams. That's like how they refer to them unofficially online. because they believe that human beings evolved from clams.
Is that why it's Operation Clam Bake? Is that where it came from?
Yes,
okay,
that's exactly why.
You know what?
Yes.
I never knew that. That makes sense to me now. And by the way, they were DC-3. Somebody corrected me. DC-3 planes that they.
Hold on.
Yeah, DC-3. Yes.
Yeah.
Why clams? I have to know why clams.
I don't know. I mean, it was just so there's this book called The History of Man, and the idea is that it's supposed to be like a cold, hard, factual record of your last 14 trillion years of existence or whatever. However old Hubbard thinks the universe
older than
is.
The universe. Okay.
Right, yeah. But no, the scientists are wrong. The universe is not just 14 billion years old.
Of course.
It's trillions. Okay.
So before we jump back into your personal story, what about the afterlife? What happens to you in Scientology when you pass away?
It seems interesting when you're in it, but really it's kind of depressing that you just keep getting reincarnated over and over again. So every time you would come back as a new human, but there's this whole between lives area, it's called, where you go to Mars or you go to some other place and your memories from this life are erased by some machines, and then you're sent back here again to live another life.
So does that mean that L. Ron Hubbard is walking among us again now?
He supposedly went on to what's called Target 2. Nobody knows where that is.
I love Target.
I thought he was supposed to come back. I thought they're waiting for the second coming of L. Ron Hubbard.
He's some golden child. Actually, that's not, and it's funny. Actually, that's not. At least that's not how I remember Hubbard saying it would happen. He just said he was going to Target 2, and that we would all join him there eventually. So whether or not he's really coming back, I don't know. But
no Walmart, Target. Yeah,
they do preserve all of his offices, and the other day I read this article online, and it's on this blog that follows Scientology, and it said that the Saint Hill Manor. Sorry, I was trying to remember the name. Saint Hill Manor is the headquarters of Scientology back in the day, in the 70s. They have his clothes on display, his outfits on display from when he was alive. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Sweet. It's mannequins wearing L. Ron Hubbard's clothes. Is that the building that you see? You can't see it right now, but it's on the layout. But it's that famous Scientology building that you always see with the big Scientology in huge letters? No, okay. So that one is actually here in Hollywood, just down the street from me. And they call it different names, but Big Blue or PAC Base, which stands for Pacific Area Command. So you can hear it referred to as PAC Base. So yeah, very fancy. Very military-esque. That's how they like it. That's got to be ominous looking at it every day, though, since it's right down the street from you. Is that kind of like a bad reminder? Thankfully, it's not an eye shot. I pass it occasionally, and it's okay now. I'm okay with it. It used to bother me, but not anymore. Good.
You were raised in it, but why did your parents get interested? I mean, normally the Scientology do go after the people with money, obviously. I mean, right. Let's just be honest here. The whole thing is a multi-level marketing scam. And by the way, lady that from the Scientology church that's watching, sorry, you ain't gonna get much. Trust me. But what was it about your parents that they felt wanting to join Scientology, or why did they go after them explicitly? So my dad was actually an accountant that owned a firm in Texas, in Tyler, Texas. It was a small town. I don't know actually how he encountered these people. I just know they were people from something called the World Institute of Scientology Enterprises. It's basically a fancy front group that L. Ron Hubbard had this technology that he set up that was supposed to run the churches. It's the management technology, they call it. But they try to sell it to businesses like it's going to help businesses. And my dad, for some reason, bought into it. I don't know why he bought into it. But what decade was this, if I can ask? Because he wrote Dianetics in
the 90s.
Because in 1950, when L. Ron Hubbard wrote the Dianetics, when I was born in the 70s, and so that actually was still around. That was a thing. And it was the same time big self-help movements were all over the place, right? And so it was a very popular thing to have this, like you said, the reactive and analytical mind and all this mumbo jumbo stuff with words that I think L. Ron Hubbard just made up on the spot and then kind of just threw it out to see who bought into it. Because I tried reading Dianetics once, and I couldn't get into it. I just couldn't even begin to understand what the hell they were talking about. And there was one thing I remember, maybe you can give some information on it, that you could actually like go to a machine and somehow get energy from it and like heal your mind or something.
Let me think about that.
I'm pretty sure that was in the Dianetics.
I don't know.
It's something that he wrote, but it was really bizarre.
That approached your dad?
Wise,
okay.
Wise Businesses.
Got it.
World Institute of Scientology Enterprises, but you hardly ever hear the full name because they don't want people to know it's connected to Scientology.
Clever
You'll know
name.
You have the right, yeah, Wise. It makes it sound like some people that can help you.
Wise. Are your parents still in it?
They got, yes, yeah, my parents
Really?
are, my brother is as well, and my sister is sort of, I don't know, I mean, she wasn't really into it when I was living there, but I don't know since. I haven't really spoken to them in a few years.
And how much do you think that they've invested in it? Because, I mean, that's costly buying those books and DVDs and everything else.
I mean, so my dad's OT3, and on average, by OT3, most people have invested $1 million into Scientology.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
And that includes like purchases of new releases, like the books and stuff, and also just donations to their various funds. I mean, they have all kinds of funds that they give money to, that they take money for. Who knows what they spend the money on? I mean,
right.
It's probably David Miscavige's $12,000 a day meals. But,
I was getting ready to say that. What's that dynamic like now with you and your parents? I know we're skipping kind of towards the end here, but we'll get back to the middle. But I'm just kind of interested. Do you guys have a relationship, or has this kind of separated you from them in a way?
No, I haven't spoken to them in about 6 years, actually.
Wow.
They're not allowed to, right? I mean, they can't.
No. I've tried to reach out to them. I found, randomly found email addresses here and there. I changed my phone number, and I didn't give them my new phone number because I was worried about, the church trying to come do something, because you know how they are. But they do have my email address, and I've never heard from them.
Do you think they're in so deep there's just no chance of them ever getting out, or you think they actually just like the fact that they're? I mean, when you're OT3 and you've spent that much money, the church has got to treat you pretty well.
It's an investment.
You know what? You would be surprised. They treat you like shit.
Like shit. That's amazing.
Yeah, my dad actually had a situation with one of the church celebrities one time where he needed some paperwork to do their taxes, and they didn't give the paperwork to my dad on time, and so the taxes were late. And of course, with the celebrity kind of money, that's hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 you're talking in late fees. And so he basically had to pay all of that back to them, even though it was their fault, because the church valued that person over my dad. So, and I don't know why that wasn't like the end of it for him, but
I'm sorry to hear that about.
I'm feeling really bad about all this, and
don't feel too
controlling this, but damn, that's a sucky story, dude.
Yeah, it's a dog eat dog world sometimes. But, they just keep asking for money no matter how much you've given. I mean, there's people who are OT8, which is supposedly the end, and they still give money to buy new buildings, to buy new books, I don't understand why people deal with it. But like you said, I mean, my dad particularly is probably just too invested to ever back out of it.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like
I don't know how much it would hurt him to realize he was wrong. You know what I mean? Like
it'd be devastating. It'd be mentally devastating to somebody, I would imagine.
It's a pride thing too, and on top of that, the 6 years lost with his son. I mean, that's just a lot to cope with on any level, I think. But I mean that part doesn't bother me as much as just like I wish they weren't part of that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But at the same time, my dad and I have had a rocky relationship for a while, but. My mom and I got along a lot better than him. Just how family dynamics are sometimes, I guess.
Absolutely. Let's jump back into where we were. You were at I believe I'm pronouncing this right, Sea Org?
Yeah. So that's exactly right. It's short for Sea Organization, and just some brief history. The Sea Organization is now largely on land. It was before at sea. They had 3 different ships. And the reason was because Hubbard was wanted in several countries, so he stayed in international waters.
Sweet.
But, they talk about it. It was like supposedly his journey, like to track down his old memories from past lives on Earth and verify them through evidence. And of course, there's no documentation of that anywhere. So I don't know if it actually happened. There's not really. It's kind of one of those stories that just started with no conclusion ever reached. So, like, you know, many a series on Fox or something. But he never, I don't know if he ever found anything that he was looking for, and I don't really care anymore. But he didn't want to get caught, so that's why he went on boats. And he actually tried. He tried twice in 2 different countries to overthrow the government and like take over and put Scientology in charge of things. So that's a pretty funny story too. Anyways, getting back to my story. So it's this historical organization I'm joining, and at least as far as Scientology goes. And I thought I was going to be doing all kinds of like crazy stuff, like cool spiritual stuff, but it was really basically office work. After they spent, so I'll tell you the final step on my recruitment before I joined the Sea Org is I just, I was kidnapped basically. I mean, I got to put it that way. It's taken me a while to kind of, it was taking me a while to kind of come to terms with the actual right language to use for this, but I was walking home from school, and these Sea Org recruiters, they follow you around. They want you to join. They don't want to let you go until you agree to join. So So I get out of school. It was like June, I think late May, early June. It was hot as hell, and I got to walk home, but I see them out front because I recognize the car and the uniforms, and I was like, fuck, I really don't want to talk to these guys. Sorry, can I cuss? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, fuck yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, thanks. But yeah, I saw the car, so I booked it, went the other way, went out, like, there's this whole back way to go, but at some point it ends up, like, coming together with the same route that I take home. And I guess they followed the route I traditionally take, and by the time I got there, they were right behind me. And they offered me a ride home, these 3 recruiters. It was 2 guys and a girl in a Camaro. And actually, no, this time it was just 1 guy and 1 girl, and they were in a Camaro, and they offered me a ride home, and I jumped in the back because, I mean, I'm raised to trust these people. I've been raised for years to trust these people. And so I jumped in the back, and they were going to take me home, except that we didn't go home. We went straight to that complex in Hollywood. And this is about maybe 4 o'clock when we got there. And I told them to call my parents and to tell them I was there because my parents are going to get home from work, and they're not going to know where I am. And of course, you know, they told me they did, and they put me in this little room, and they basically spent the next, 8 hours just trying to convince me to sign this contract. And I'm a little kid. I mean, I was 14 years old at this time. So I broke down and I signed it 8 hours later. And they finally gave me something to drink, something to eat. Everybody left me alone. And I called my dad. They made me call my dad, which is ridiculous, to come pick me up. And he was pissed because they didn't know where I was because nobody ever called them. And in that room that I was in, it was like a dark room. There was 1 window with blinds over it. There was like a light, 1 light, and a phone that wasn't even plugged in. So there was really nothing for me. Like, I couldn't have called them even if I wanted to.
Let me stop you there. That seems illegal as hell.
Yeah. I mean, when the parents are complicit, that's the problem. Had my parents had the, I guess, wherewithal to report it to the police, those people would probably be in jail.
But the state can prosecute without the parents. I mean, if there's something that is illegal, which clearly it sounds like there was, is it just that the law they don't know about it? They were not informed? Something along those lines? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way it would get back to them.
They didn't even notify your parents, did they? They didn't let your parents know that they were going to do this.
No,
but if it happened to you, it happened to other people, right? I mean, how come you don't hear more about people being arrested for that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, the church is just super insular. It's like a community of people. So, I mean, they bend rules, do things that are illegal frequently with people. They move kids around that, like with us, when because I was 15, my parents pulled me out of school and I went to go work for these people and I had no schooling. And so they basically the government pressured them into getting kids graduated, like underage kids. So I got what's called a proficiency exam certificate. And it's basically a GED type thing. So I was one of the lucky ones that actually got it. So when I was able to get work when I left the Sea Org, which is way down the line. But at this point, they only did it because they were pressured to by outside authorities. But typically, my brother, you can try to find him. There's no documentation on him anywhere. Nobody knows where he is. He has no listed residence. My family, because I have, my mom and dad's family that I talk to still, because none of them are Scientologists, and they haven't heard anything from my folks or about my brother at all. So nobody really knows where he is. And if you wanted to find him, Scientology is the only one who can find him. Even my parents probably don't know where they keep him. So
this
they
does not
move
sound
people
real.
around.
This does not sound real.
It's very real for me, obviously, but for me, for a while, I just kept thinking like that just wasn't that abnormal. I don't know. I guess I had nothing to compare it to, and so to me, it didn't seem like anything was wrong.
How did you get a comparator? How did you actually break from that mindset? Because that's got to be conditioning.
We're getting there, Steve.
Yeah. That's getting there. That's its own little story too. So I'll try to keep going. But anyways, at this point, to me, this seemed like it was just happening. Like I guess that's how I made it through most of my life. Is it's just like, well, this shit's happening, and I just have to deal with it. I can't really think about what could be or what was. It's like, this is the new reality, so I'm dealing with it. And yeah, that's definitely how things are done. I think they try to be a little more careful now about like paper trails and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know how, like, the kind of stuff that I do know, the kind of stuff that other people have been through, and some of it's even worse than what I've been through. But like the working 17 hours a day for like what are supposed to be my last years of high school, it's pretty shitty, like, to begin with. And they had me, first of all, they had me working. I did like random stuff for them, but eventually they moved me down to the basement to do filing for them. And they have these huge files where they keep records on everyone that's ever been involved in the organization, address histories, and they write letters to them to try and get them to come back to Scientology. And so that was like one of my duties, my first duties for like the first year that I was there. And I mean, that whole time I'm living and working in the same block. I literally lived right across the street from where I worked, and my job kept me there as late as they could. I mean, I stayed till 3 a.m. a lot, just filing papers, believe it or not. It's such a controlling organization to begin with for people that aren't even in the Sea Org. When you're in the Sea Org, everything is regulated. You can never go anywhere alone. You're not allowed to leave the complex alone. You have to have like a buddy with you whenever you go anywhere. I even got screamed at for going to eat lunch with my parents. They would come pick me up, and they would take me to go get pizza or something, because the food is not the best food. It's not the worst food. I could imagine eating worse things, but the food there is cheap. I mean, the last I read, I think they feed everybody 65 cents a day per person, which is just incredibly cheap food. Yeah. Like, and I actually have a friend who was in prison, and when he was a kid, and like he described it to me, and it's the same damn thing, except that I didn't have a door locked in front of me. I was just afraid to leave, like the doors in my head. You know what I mean? And they have, at that time, they had people as young as 12 years old doing this stuff. Wow. There were some kids who were kids of Sea Org members that were taken care of by some random third party at some place out in the desert. And they had to build their little camp where they lived. They essentially had to build it, these kids. And you're talking about, these kids are like 5 or 6 years old. So we just got accustomed to working, I guess. And so you don't really hear about this kind of stuff, because to the kids, it's not bad. And then the parents don't want to report it, or they don't want to believe it, one or the other, who knows?
That's crazy. The work you did they at least pay you? Like, was that a paying?
No, I mean, I was a slave. I was a slave. Like, it's not comparable to how bad it was back in the 1800s, and 1700s, but like, that's a modern day slave is what I was. I got denied meals, and I got paid about, I want to say $50 a week, maybe on average. I actually was recently looking at my income history on my tax returns, and I was like, Jesus, I can't even believe how little money I made back then, and a lot of that wasn't even take home.
Has anybody walked out? I mean, obviously they'd probably discourage that, and they'd probably maybe even physically try to stop you. But I mean, has there ever been people who just say, you know what, I'm done, and they just leave? Or
I mean, yeah, I know Mark Headley, for example. And his wife Claire Headley. They're like really public people about their experience. They've written a book. Well, actually, Mark wrote a book about his experience, and I can't remember if Claire wrote one, but anyways, he described his escape in that book, and it was crazy. Like he managed to grab like a motorcycle and just take off through the gate before anybody noticed something was wrong. And then they tried to run him off the road while he was on his way to Hemet to get a Greyhound somewhere. They came up with an SUV and they ran his bike off the road, and the police came. And I guess Mark was just like, I understand his mindset. Like the first thing that comes to your mind is not to call law enforcement. I mean, you're taught to be afraid of them. Like they're all psychiatrists and they're trying to brainwash you. So, avoid anybody that's in authority. And so this is the mentality I have while I'm there working for them. And the mentality pretty much everybody else has is that the outside world is more dangerous than what we're dealing with. And like, now I know that's not true, obviously, but when you're a kid, you don't know better.
I've got to say, I never thought that I would ever say that I miss Christians, but this is making me.
I know. It's worse than the other Christians.
I took you Christians for granted. Okay, all of you Christians listening, I took you for granted. Seriously, because this is heartbreaking. On like a serious note, this is like on a level that it's hard to process almost, because these almost seem like stories that you see in a movie that's fiction, and that this isn't real, because this goes beyond what I think the stereotype of Scientology is, because I had kind of like a ground level knowledge of Scientology. You hear, you see what is in the media and with Tom Cruise and all that, but to go this deep and I mean, you got robbed. That's the short of it. You got robbed of a childhood and
But Kyle, do you see why now when people use that word cult, I reserve it for stuff like this? Because you're talking in a way of a level of just mind-boggling the slavery. I think it's torture. I think it's mental abuse. I think it's indoctrination. I mean, Scientology across the board to me reeks of cult. And so when people throw down that word for other types of religious organizations, I don't think they're in the same.
I think it still applies, though. I think it still applies, because each religion has. I mean, not like Christianity.
I have never seen anything like this in LDS. Not
this
even remotely in the ballpark. Nothing.
This takes the cake. But I mean, there are certain sects of Christianity that that do fit that as well. They're not nearly this reprehensible or despicable.
This is probably the worst. Scientology has got. I don't know what organization.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of former LDS and former Jehovah's Witnesses and former Orthodox Jewish and members, and they're all like, you take the cake as far as like
take the cake.
Religions like that
I know
go.
There's a lot of horror stories, but I'm familiar with some of them, but every time I hear them, my heart goes out. I mean, just
absolutely. And I will say that for what you went through, and I know that we're not done yet, but good on you for not letting it, whip you, and for getting up and bouncing back and swinging still. Like that says a lot about you, that you didn't use it as an excuse to do anything but get yourself back up, get yourself on your feet, and you've got a great disposition about you. I mean, you're friendly. You've got just like you kind of beam almost. So I mean, that's really good to see you come out of it like that. So you should be proud. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I really do. Means a lot. Yeah. It took a lot of work, took a lot of therapy, and I mean, first going to therapy, that was a big step too. But anyways, I don't want to skip too far ahead. But sure. I do appreciate that, though. It's nice to be validated.
I have to agree 100%. So I'm thrilled that you're able to make it through all that and come out in a good place. I mean, especially because now you speak with a position of some kind of authority, only the fact that you've experienced it, and your story resonates with other people, and you'll be able to help people. And I think that what you're doing, I don't know what to call it activism per se. I don't know how much you are active against the Scientology, but even just coming on here and telling your story, it takes some kind of courage to do so. So,
thanks. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, nothing was as hard as I went on stage in front of some people and told my story, and like the spotlight, literally, and that was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it always is.
This is easier than that.
It gets a little easier each time, I'm sure, but still, it's a special person that's able to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I know I've heard a lot of people's stories, a lot of people that don't go public with their stories, and like I was definitely part of one of the worst groups out there, but I definitely didn't have the worst experience. If that makes sense.
I hate to say this, but let's. I kind of feel bad, like I'm kind of bringing you back through these evil memories now. I'm kind of.
It's okay. Okay. It's okay. I've had a lot of therapy. They're a little desensitized, so don't worry about it. I'm okay.
Well, so let's troop through some more then. So we last left off where you they watched you everywhere, and they even followed you because you went to lunch with your parents, and they screamed at you.
They saw me on the security cameras, and I got in trouble for that. This was during my stay in Hollywood, and about a year and a half after I was in Hollywood, working for a while, because I ended up actually, this is another interesting aspect, but I worked in the sales department, and they call it the registration area. I don't know why it's referred to that way, but they call everybody registrars. They're actually salespeople. And I was an assistant to one of them. I made phone calls for her, wrote letters for her, reached out to contacts for her, charged credit cards for her. And I saw some interesting things in there, like Scientologists who work at American Express opening up cards and increasing credit limits without the person even present to, confirm it. This is before 9/11 and before identity crime was like it was now, but those registrars were able to just open credit cards of people's names because they knew the employees that worked at places like American Express and Visa and MasterCard.
Wow.
I watch people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on American Express cards and just break down crying. And like these other people are patting them on the back like they just did a good thing. You know what I mean? And it's like all that money's gone. There's no getting it back.
And they do have a war chest, do they not? I mean, I have heard that even the amount of exodus that has come from the Scientology church, people are leaving in droves in a lot of places, but they have enough to keep going till the end of the century just by the amount of funding that they already have. They're worth a lot of freaking money.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I want to say the last I heard, because there was a lady named Debbie Cook. I don't know if you saw her, but her trial was very public. She was actually in charge of their Florida organization, which, segue, this is where I go next after my time in Los Angeles. But she said that they have $1 billion in cash reserves. And that's just cash. That's, that's crazy to me. I mean, with that kind of money, they probably don't even spend it. It's probably the interest on that money.
I mean,
on their legal cases,
they don't touch the
stuff.
Principal. Yeah,
imagine the good you could do with that, though. Like, imagine the good things that you could put that $1 billion to.
No, I'm with you, because even the Mormon church, I mean, maybe they only do it for Mormons, but they have like food stocks where people can go to get food when they can't afford to go to the store.
By the way, it's not just for Mormons too. I mean, they have a transport thing, and I helped out with the food bank before. They at least try to give back. I mean, so I mean, to me, that puts them far and above an organization like Scientology, because Scientology doesn't do any charity. They talk about how they do charity a lot, but their version of charity is like they take a book written by L. Ron Hubbard and give it to kids for free in some third world country, and that's their charity. Yeah,
and it's like, dude, the kids don't even have like a high school education or elementary education. You're going to give them books to read. It's just crazy.
God, I'm just getting sickened by this, to be honest with you. I mean,
this is bizarre. I mean, this is bizarre.
And like you were saying earlier, the most people know about it is generally what you see in the media, and the problem is the media portrays the wacky, crazy aspect of it. But there's really a dark side to it. I mean, it's really a dark organization. That show, did you guys watch the Leah Remini series on A&E?
I've watched bits and pieces of it, and I've had friends that are familiar with Scientology. So your stories are, unique to you. I've heard similar type things.
Yes.
So I know how dark the Scientology actually can be. And the fact that like you said, it's not coming to light except when you have somebody like Leah that comes forth and has a show. I don't know why it took so long.
Going Clear was good too. I saw that.
Oh, that was so good. That made me laugh and cry, man. That was a good movie.
I bet that's hard for you to watch stuff like that too. I mean, that's got to be. Yeah.
Good. I mean, sometimes I even have a little survivor's guilt because I see what other people went through that I didn't have to suffer, and it's kind of like, wow,
you suffered enough.
Sucks.
You suffered enough.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
You suffered enough. That's for sure.
But where do we leave off? Do you remember?
We left off
in the sales area. I'm working in the
Yes.
sales area. Okay, so after I was there for about, I want to say 8 months or so, they sent me to Florida. They wanted me to train the captain. They call it the captain. That's like the CEO of an organization, basically. She came and asked me to go, and I didn't want to go. And she told me, well, if I don't go, then I'm going to have to spend basically the rest of my life doing confessionals. And I mean, that's pretty shitty. I don't want to have to do that. So I went because she threatened me to go. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah, she threatened me with confessionals. She threatened me that I was going to lose my family, get declared a suppressive person, which is like excommunication, shunning, there's different names for it. But she coerced me into going, and I told my parents I was going to go because that was the reason I didn't want to go. I'm going to be 3,000 miles away from my parents, and like I had never been that far from them, and they encouraged me and told me it was great, and they were excited for me to go, of course. And to be honest, when I got there, the treatment there was better than I had at Pack Base on the West Coast. The food was better because that organization has more money. And I got to sleep because one of the rules in Scientology is that in order to study, you have to be well rested. So during that part of my Sea Org, which is the last of it, the experience was better as far as work hour demands went. But the written confessionals, spoken confessionals, those things still were going on. And you still live in this atmosphere of being afraid of being caught doubting. A lot of people I know have doubts, and even people who are hardcore members, there's always that voice in the back of your head wanting to break free, and you have to constantly shut it up. And, I couldn't, and this ended my Sea Org career because while I was there, I basically fell in love with another staff member. He was a male staff member. Obviously, Scientology's homophobic. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's very homophobic.
I did not know that.
Yeah. L. Ron Hubbard considered gays and lesbians and bisexual to be perverted and gross and basically on the level of child molesters.
He was not
deviancy.
Yeah. You would think that with a guy who's a science fiction writer prior, that he would kind of have some leniency that way. Being in that field. That surprises me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, especially there's no the Thetan isn't supposed to have a gender. That's like Scientology's version of a spirit. Like they believe that there's no gender in the Thetan, so it makes no sense. You would think they would be progressive about it, but it's a fundamentalist religion, and fundamentalist religions are required to have homophobia in them for some reason. I don't know why.
Seems to be a theme with religion. I think it seems to be a theme with.
I think I might know why. Throughout history, I think that mankind has wanted to have a central thing that they hate, and so I think what L. Ron Hubbard and religious organizations do is they say, "Look, we're going to make this is the scapegoat, whether it be the Jew, whether it be the homosexual, whatever." They have recognized over a period of time that human nature is such that you can kind of gather people together and give them a focus point for their hatred, because I think as human beings, we do have some kind of we don't all have hate, but we all have things that we don't like, and I think that these organizations focus on that because it gives a unity to the group. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to tell them, but that tide is turning.
Absolutely. Yes, it is turning, and hopefully it goes away completely. But
I would want to be on the right side of history. Is all I'm saying. The right side of the fabulous history.
I mean, the big thing about Scientology is that their own rules say they can't change anything. So, I mean, it's not like that's going to go away. They try to de-emphasize it to the public, obviously, because it's not a good thing to be homophobic anymore like it used to be.
Two of their most prominent members are gay. Two of their most prominent members, John Travolta and Tom Cruise.
But they don't talk about that.
I'm just saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I mean, you look at them, they both have been married to women. Granted, Tom Cruise adopted his kids, but John Travolta had kids with his wife. And the really sad thing, by the way, his son that died of autism, or died of seizure, but had autism and a seizure disorder. I mean, I know the church was against medicating him. I just know that Scientology policy, they're sort of like Christian Scientists in that way. I think they're not allowed to seek medical treatment from medical professionals. I mean, the most basic of treatments they'll go for, and if they're dying, they'll go for like chemotherapy if they have to. But generally, they look down on it.
Medicine, as far as like psychological medicine, any kind of things like SSRIs or tricyclics or antidepressants, they are adamantly against any of that stuff.
And it's funny, that's the very public part of it, but the not so public part of it is they're not even allowed to take Tylenol or aspirin for headaches. You're not allowed to take cold medicine if you have a cold.
That vitamins can cure everything, do they not? I mean, on a program where they kind of say, hey, you know what, we're going to overload your body with these vitamins and stuff and kind of cure any addiction that you have.
How are you John Travolta, though, and you go through these fantastic movies, you're the darling of America. Like, what about this draws you in? You know what I mean? Like, I can't fathom. Like, if you grow up in it, that's one thing, because that's all that you know. But from the outside, hearing the stories, and especially with John Travolta, because when did L. Ron Hubbard establish this and actually became a...
He wrote Dianetics in like 1950.
1950, yeah.
Okay, so...
It was published in 50. I think he had it written in 49. I just read a letter
he claims
recently.
that a lot of it came from the 20s and 30s.
Do people not think about what happened before then? Like, in the 1800s? No. Or, what did people do before L. Ron Hubbard came? Like, nobody stops and asks that question?
I mean, no, I guess. I mean, it's kind of a blind faith kind of thing. It's just, you believe L. Ron Hubbard has the answer to everything, and
it was
you just roll with it.
Then. I mean, between the 50s and the 70s and the Age of Enlightenment, this was something that was very common. And I think that if L. Ron Hubbard had come along like in 2018, never would have been established. He would
have had Google now. But I'm just saying, when you're comparing religions, right, and you have a book that has the origin story in the Bible, the creation story, it's been around for thousands of years, and you're comparing it to one that came about in the 1950s. I mean, you have to wonder, like, what makes you go with Plan with Plan B?
He's charismatic, from what I understand. I mean, people that are charismatic can get a lot of followers. I mean, look at Hovind.
You know what I mean? I cannot believe he was that charismatic. It is kind of crazy to me that people actually buy into it, because looking back on my childhood, it just doesn't. I mean, I've basically been out of that mindset since I was 18. It took a lot of work to get fully reintegrated into society and then, the normal world. But when I was an adult, I was kind of like, this is tooth fairy shit. This is Santa Claus shit. Like, this is not, you can't live your life imagining that you used to be Julius Caesar and Jesus. Like, you just can't do that.
You said you had therapy, but and I hate to ask it, but was it deprogramming?
No. I just went to a therapist at Kaiser Permanente,
but it wasn't it wasn't some kind of a de-indoctrination therapy or anything relating to.
No. Okay. I know some people have done that. I don't know what the difference is, but I was never that invested in it. I was kind of ready to ditch the mindset already by the time I went to therapy. I mean, it took a lot of work to even get myself to the point where I could go to therapy, and then to accept medication was even crazier for me. It was all like a huge experience for me, obviously.
Yeah, because you're taught not to trust any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people would look at this like stuff like this and just see the I thought that, my story growing up and how my religion kept me from coming out because of who I was harmful, but it's nothing compared to your story. And I wish people would just see these kind of stories and understand how harmful these things can be, because there are certain extreme religions like this that has a huge effect on people. Like, there's a cost for what goes on in these
a human cost. There's a human cost to it. Yeah. I mean, some of these people are brilliant. I mean, some of the people that are Scientologists, you wouldn't believe it, are brilliant, and nothing has ever made me sadder than to think of the minds that are wasted in there.
But do you think that a lot of them, they become Scientologists or they stay in because Scientology does try to give back to certain people? I mean, they promise you certain things. I mean, look at John Travolta in his career, or even Tom Cruise. Probably, I mean, yes, they're great actors, don't get me wrong, except for Battlefield.
I don't know about either one of their careers anymore, but yeah, back in the day.
But the reason they got where they are, one of the things that Scientology does, they go after these famous people, they go after the Hollywood types because they do have the connections, they do get them to the interviews, they do get them the positions, and then the whole thing is, as you said, when you're audited, they have a dossier on people, they have a whole folder on people, and that prevents them from kind of like leaving later on because now they have all this dirt on you. So it's a sacrifice. Here's my dirt. Get me a job, in the Hollywood type community. And I think that's kind of the trade-off. And a lot of them may realize later on, this is complete bullshit, but you know what? My livelihood depends on it now.
That's really spot on. That's exactly how it works.
Religion,
at least for
everything.
Yeah, because it becomes a community, and then you become reliant on the community, and you don't want to be cut off from it. Because then once you're cut off, you have to start over because you can't use those people for your job history anymore on your resume. All of a sudden, it's like you never worked for the last 20 years.
What do they call me? A subversive. You're done, right? I mean,
suppressive. Yeah, suppressive. Yeah. Subversive would make more sense, but suppressive is what they like.
So you fell for a staff member.
Yeah, this really, really handsome guy from England, actually. I met him. We were sharing a dorm together, and we never did anything sexual. That's the crazy. Like, it was never, there was no lines crossed. It was just kind of like innocent love, you know what I mean, between teenagers. And we would just lay in bed together and talk about stuff and cuddle, basically. And that was it. To me, it felt like I was doing something crazy, insane. And now, like, you think back on it, and what kids were doing at my age already, back then was just doesn't even compare. But
you're tame, trust me.
Yes, yeah. But to me, I mean, it was a big deal. And so one time, like, I went to go, like, I think I had a nightmare or something, and I just went to go lay with them for a minute. But like, other people were asleep in the room, other guys, and one of them happened to wake up to go to the restroom, and I was like, "Fuck, this is it." You know what I mean? Like, I got caught now, and my stupid teenage hormones. But anyways, after that, he wrote a report that explaining basically what he saw, because that's a big thing in Scientology, is reporting each other. If you see anybody doing anything that goes against church doctrine, you're supposed to report them. And that's like a long written up explanation of the standards they follow are time, place, form, and event. So like the form is basically what happened, and then everything else, and the event is like the end result or like the conclusion. And then you have to say when and where it happened as well. I mean, it's very explicit. And so
is that what they call the knowledge report?
Yeah, knowledge report. Yeah, there's a lot of different reports, and they're basically all the same thing. It's just to get people in trouble. They're political tools, essentially.
I've heard that even if you have nothing to even witness, they encourage people to go find something, just anything for a knowledge report. To make shit up they don't say that, but I mean, do you think that a lot of people do knowledge reports just because they want it to do some kind of like virtual signaling of some kind and fit in to the group? You said
maybe. I mean, maybe they're pressured into it like that. Yes. And it's also sort of like an Orwellian type thing where totally. You're afraid you're going to get caught participating in someone else's bad act, or you're going to be an accessory after the fact, and you're going to get
blame the other person. I'm not involved in that. They're the one. Look what they're doing. Don't look what I'm doing wrong. Look what they're doing wrong. Yeah.
Basically, trying to
abdicate get your ass handed to you, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a team. I mean, you're supposed to work as a team in the military.
That is exactly
Scientology is not a team.
Military.
Yeah, Scientology is very ego-driven. I mean, it's all about pumping up the individual and making them feel important in the community, and so that's what drives a lot of people to stay involved in it, because they get a name. Like my dad, for example, when they came to him, they put his face in a magazine, the Scientology magazine, and all these people saw it, and he had all these new Scientology clients, and that was sort of part of their like deal. Like we'll like you were saying, we'll get you a job and we'll make you known in a community. And sure enough, he ended up hooking up with that celebrity, and it screwed him. And still, like, it's like an abusive relationship. You keep going back to it. I don't know. I mean, I think my dad strayed a few times over the years, but anyways, getting back to my story, just to finish it. After that was discovered, I basically was sent back here to LA, and I was put to work in the basement. I don't know if you know, but underneath L. Ron Hubbard Way, underneath all of the hospitals, former hospitals that are there, the blue buildings, there's tunnels, and down in the tunnels, they keep all kinds of stocks, like book stocks and different products like e-meters you can find down there. And I was basically just packaging those up and shipping them for months while they were basically scheduling a confessional for me. And then I had to sit in front of this dude who was probably 3 times my age and explain to him my masturbation habits and my sexual fantasies. And I mean, I'm a 17-year-old kid. It was really a strange, unusual experience because I had never even spoken to my own parents about sex or about the fact that I was gay, you know? My dad was homophobic before Scientology, and then after Scientology, it made it even worse. I mean, I'm sure it was like the macho East Texas guy thing in the beginning, which you can overcome kind of, and people still maintain connections despite that. It's kind of an awkward like elephant in the room, but still, at least, you know, you're still talking to your dad. But Scientology just demands you cut off all contact with somebody who is no longer a member. So when I was 18 when I finally, like 18 and 4 days, when I finally got booted out of the Sea Org and dropped at home on my parents' doorstep, basically. They didn't even know I was coming home. Nobody had notified them. When I called my dad, he was at work, and he came home and said some pretty hateful things to me about what had happened. And then I just kind of took a walk, a very long walk around. I was in Eagle Rock at the time, and I pretty much walked around the entire city for a good like 4 or 5 hours, just trying to clear my head because I didn't know what the hell else to do. And I had a little bit of cash because they make you sign like a piece of paper that says you loved it there and it was the best experience ever in the Sea Org. And then they give you $500, and that's like the deal. Unless you're like Debbie Cook, for example, or Marty Rathbun, who were like famous members, they get bigger payouts. I found out like 50 grand or more. Some of them have bought houses with the payout because they know a lot. I don't know a lot. I'm just like a low level guy, which is kind of the story that I feel goes undertold, you know, a lot, is just not the celebrity guy, not the I was a management guy. I'm just like the rank and file member. And I had nowhere to fall back. I wasn't independently wealthy. So I realized, and this is why I was walking in circles around Eagle Rock, is I realized I was stuck. I had nowhere to go. I mean, I couldn't be my genuine self at home, because if that was going to happen, then I would have to leave. So I had to plan. I had to make a plan, and it was a long plan. An 8-year plan it took, actually, finally. But I knew I needed to get a job and stuff like that. So that was basically, after I left the Sea Org, I got a job, like a regular job working for a Scientologist. And then I sort of used that to build a resume for the next 8 years. And I ended up making some cool friends too, who were part of my leaving process. And part of what you were asking earlier about where did I get something to compare to? That's where, I mean, I would listen to their childhood. I would listen to them, like things like the TV show Jackass. I was just watching it right now. Like or the movies. I never had seen that. And like everybody was talking about it, and I would just nod my head and laugh because I didn't want to seem like the weirdo. And like, as soon as I got the opportunity, I would try to watch it, or at least some clips from it, on YouTube. But I was very out of the loop on all kinds of stuff. Cell phones, the internet, it had all blown up while I was in the Sea Org, and I had no clue. I mean, my aunt gave me a cell phone one time, a Nokia, one of those ones that was like indestructible, and they took it away from me. You're not allowed to have cell phones. You can only use church phones. So I had no contact with the outside world, essentially. And then
because they used to be all into the internet back years ago. The church really wanted people to go on the internet, try to recruit, talk about the church, and find people that were against the church. And now I think they've gone 180, and they've actually told people, don't have the internet, don't go online. I mean, have you seen that change? I
knew about the internet. I mean, to me, when I was in the Sea Org and back in the early 2000s, it was like just it wasn't what it is now. Now it's an integral part of our lives. Like everything we do is internet focused in some way. And back then it wasn't that big of a deal. So it was kind of like this. It went from being this thing that was interesting to share, like emails and stuff on, to, yes, this evil, stay away from it. It's the worst place ever because it has lies about us there. And that was definitely a strange thing for me. And it was strange that all I wanted to do was like consume information, and the internet's basically an unlimited supply. of factful information. If you know how to, do your searches right and go to the right websites, you can learn anything about anything pretty much. I mean, I'm sure the materials to become a heart surgeon are on the internet, for crying out loud. And all I wanted was to be on it. And yes, I was definitely discouraged from using the internet for a while. And then it's like, oh, these certain websites you avoid. And then the Scientology released these books on CD, which they had never done before. And they were actual, the management volumes, they call them, the stuff that Wise sells to people. You put the CD in your computer, it installs a program, but what it didn't tell you is it installs a net nanny in there, and it blocks certain websites, URLs.
I've heard
there
that.
Were tons of them. Yeah,
and
Operation Clambake was one.
Yeah,
of
that
them.
one's definitely.
Yeah,
that one's a no-no. You go to
that's top of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a net nanny.
I've been to that site many times, but that they hate that site with a passion.
Yeah. They, they hate any site that says anything negative about Scientology, and that's probably the worst part. Is that I probably could get over it if they would just admit that they fucked up and move on. You know what I mean? Admit that you fucked up, fix the shit, and just carry on. And end the harmful practices. You know what I mean? Don't employ kids anymore. And simple shit like that. Just don't use child labor. How can you just not pay people minimum wage? You make enough money, you can pay people minimum wage. If you started to do stuff like that, people may not be so angry at you all the time, But they don't want to do it.
So before we take questions from the audience, talk to me about when you finally got out. What was that day like, and how? I know this is a rhetorical question, but how has life been since you finally got out? I know it's tremendously better, but tell us about that.
So when I got a job with Scientologists, building my resume, and when I first sort of made my foray into the real world through a headhunting agency, I got a job with a non-Scientology company, and it came with vacation days, and it came with benefits, and I could call in sick, and it was just people knowing that you were in the Sea Org, Scientologists knowing that you were in the Sea Org will take advantage of Sea Org members because they know they're desperate for jobs, and they can use them to work hard because we're used to it, and we won't complain about it. So I never really heard of overtime, and I didn't know employee laws. And when I started to finally, the thing that ended me wanting to have anything to do with Scientologist-owned companies, was when I basically found out that if you get fired and you want to collect minimum wage, and you want to collect unemployment, that you have to sue to get it if the company refuses. And the thing in Scientology, you can never sue a Scientologist or anything connected to Scientology. And so if I were to sue for my unemployment, I'm fucked. I'm homeless now. So yeah, I have my unemployment, but where the fuck do I live? So I didn't like that predicament. And again, it was another one of those long walk thought processes where I kind of just figured out how to get out, and I did. And having a regular job was just a relief. I couldn't even tell you how relieved I was to be able to go home at the end of the day and not feel guilty. It was an awesome experience. And then my friends that I met, actually at that first job, a lot of them were, they would talk about their childhoods and their high school and their stuff, and how their family relationships, and I would see their family dynamics, playing out in front of me. And I was like, damn, my fucking family sucks. It's really shitty when I go home. I hate it. And I told them that I'm gay, and they're cool with it. They don't even give a shit, and they're making jokes, and wow, this is awesome. I like this, but I fucking hate when I go home. And that went on for years. And it got to the point where I would be gone all day just to avoid my parents. I would wait till they were asleep in bed, and then I would go home and go to sleep. And I would get up after they left to go to work, and then I would go to work. I just didn't want to talk to them because it was a nightmare. And really what really set me off is I almost had an argument with my dad about whether or not the moon landing was real. And I was like, this is fucking crazy. This man is this is my father, and that's stupid. Why would you even I couldn't fathom that thought process. And then my dad having that thought, it was very weird, and it was aggravating. And then he would say things he would be watching American Idol, and he would talk about the gay contestants, and he would make all kinds of horrible comments about them. And I just couldn't deal with that anymore. I wanted to avoid them, and I did for a while, and I kind of got used to not seeing them, I guess. And that was when I finally unloaded on a friend of mine and just told her everything about it. I had never really told anyone. I mean, she was the first person I really sat down and said, hey, I have some shit to tell you, because she had told me some stuff that happened in her life that was crazy. And I was like, my turn. Because when you think about it, just even talking about it now, how am I going to convince someone that this is even real? You know what I mean? Like, it just seems
20
crazy.
years ago, you probably couldn't have done it, to be honest with you. Now that a lot of these stories are out there, I think people are a lot more willing to accept these types of stories. But let me ask you, if you were gay, do you think you would still be a member? Or do you think that was that because you think that it obviously had a huge impact on your decision making? But do you think it was something that had you not been gay, you might still be involved in Scientology for whatever reason?
I mean, I think it was a factor, but I don't think it was the deciding factor.
Okay, so you still would have, eventually your mind would have been like, hey, you know what, something's not quite right here, and you probably would have let it away.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that schism happened when I read my first book about Scientology that was supposed to be a balanced take on it called Inside Scientology by this lady. I think she also wrote for the Rolling Stone. Janet Reitman is her name, but she's like a journalist. And I read her book, and it was a very like balanced take on it, but also like, to me, objectively viewing the thing I was involved in, I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, this is crazy. Like, this is the shit they believe, the shit they're doing. And then, just reading about how they were describing life in the church, and it's like, that's a lie. I mean, that's not even, it's not even a bending the truth. Like, they would absolutely lie about things. Like, the Rehabilitation Project Force is a reform program where you go to some camp with a lake and stuff. And no, dude, they make people sleep in boiler rooms and do construction work without proper security, devices attached to them. They're people, the ship, Free Winds is their ship now, the only one they own. And it has asbestos on it still. I mean, my dad has lung problems, and he's been going to the ship with asbestos on it.
Yeah,
and
I heard that the lagging has the asbestos on it, because I was in the Navy, and you have some of the older stuff would have what's called asbestos lagging, and you actually had to be qualified and to be an asbestos rip out team to go in and take that asbestos out.
Yes.
The nasty stuff is a plastic type thing with barbs, and it'll actually get stuck in your lungs and causes mesothelioma, which is inflammations of the lungs and bacteria, and it's just nasty shit. But yeah, you got to have a special training to go in and remove that asbestos stuff. I hated where I did. I only had one place on our entire ship where we still had it, but it was encapsulated so well that it was like, you know what, it's best to leave it alone rather than try to rip it out.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like the ceilings that they have where they painted over the asbestos and it's just there.
Yeah, nasty stuff.
Yeah, seriously. But the Free Winds, their ship has that on it, and as far as I know, since it was discovered by the United States, they have not docked in a United States port since. They just stay in the Caribbean, because I'm assuming they have not cleaned it out. I can't imagine why they would. That ship's gonna fall apart anyways. But
I wouldn't work on it.
I've never wanted to give somebody a hug more than I do right now.
Me too. Can we just group hug?
I feel like
give him a hug.
You deserve a really big hug for what you've been going through. I mean, I appreciate you. I know this can't be easy to go through this, even as far out as you are now, to kind of have to, because it's not easy for me to listen to. I mean, I got choked up several parts of.
Makes you angry too. Makes you damn.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's just it's heartbreaking. I mean, that's the only word that comes to mind right now, is just how heartbreaking that entire world is, and to think that there are actually people that still are dealing with that. Like, if anything, like Steve said earlier, your willingness to come on and your bravery to come on and tell your story, I know somewhere down the line is going to be the difference on whether somebody gets out or stays in or not, because you never know how what things like this that you do can help and affect other people. So, I mean, you deserve to be commended for having the bravery to come on here and tell your story, as hard as it is, I'm sure.
And you're about to get 100 people hugging you in the live chat, because
I appreciate that. Yes, it's definitely been a heartbreak, and I have to say that being out now, like in living a regular life, was worth it to me. It still makes me sad, it's bittersweet, and I understand that song better than I ever could now. But I am really happy now. So at least there's that to, kind of lighten the mood a little. Good. I'm in a really good place now, and it may be without my parents and my sister, my brother, but that's their choice, not mine.
You being happy now is the biggest fuck you that you can give.
Exactly. Right.
So,
yeah.
Exactly.
I think we've got a couple questions from people that in the live chat. If you're cool with answering a couple, and then
of course, yeah. I've never been shy to answer questions, so.
Yeah, there's a couple questions here. I actually like this one because I watched this episode, and they had asked if you did. Did you watch the South Park episode on Scientology? And if so, what'd you think of it? Because I thought it was one of their best episodes, to be honest with you.
It was really good. I really like their take on the Xenu story, the way they animated it. It's awesome. And I use it on Giphy all the time. It's amazing.
Was it accurate? I mean, it was an accurate representation.
I mean, as far as it is. And the weird thing is I hadn't, when I watched it, I hadn't read OT3. I didn't know anything about it. And I was watching the episode like, this is kind of weird. Like, this is crazy. But my dad was sitting next to me. And like, he's trying to play it cool, because he knows that that's the damn truth, because he's read it himself. And at that point I hadn't. And like, he just played it cool. Like, no, that's not even true. Just straight up lied to my face. And so reflecting on it, it's a real different experience, but in the moment,
he believes Xenu. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
The reason I'll just give you an example of like the insight into a Scientologist's mind. The reason that he believes that the moon landing was faked was because L. Ron Hubbard said that Xenu put a screen around the Earth that you can't get through. It's 50 miles above the surface. Sorry.
So wait a minute. So the DC-3s and the atomic bombs and volcanoes and thetans, that's fine. Moon hoax landing, that's a little bit too much for some people. So I can't wrap my head around.
You never get away from the firmament.
You can't get away from the firmament, I guess. So
we do a lot with flat Earth. We have a lot of flat Earth people come in here to debate. So we're used to hearing about that big screen that prevents people from going up. So
you can't get away from putting the firmament here. It wasn't God's dome. It was like Xenu putting a screen.
Xenu to capture thetans, so they couldn't leave
75 million
Earth.
Years ago.
Yeah, 75 million years ago.
Wait a minute. I thought he was dead by that point or something.
We need a Scientologist to debate a flat earther. I think that would be.
Oh my god!
Break the internet.
That would break the internet.
I would definitely watch that. That would be fun.
So would I. That's what's scary. What's wrong with us?
I don't know. But I've tried. I've done my fair share of arguing with people that believe stuff like that, and there's just no. They are not appealing to their rational mind at all.
I got to tell you, I used to think flat earthers were the worst of the worst, but you're kind of moving my needle further down the line. Scientologists are above and beyond. The stuff that they believe is just there used to be. If you should look, I'll tell you what. If you can write this down, take a look at it after we're done. It's called OT phenomena. So OT is short for operating thetan, right? And then phenomena. And it basically lists its stories that were featured in Scientology articles in a magazine called Advance, and they're like these OT powers that people have. And I've heard of those things that they never actually get, and then they tell you, we're not going to promise these things, but if it was real, this is what you would have. Okay.
There's this girl like that. There's
Time
this girl.
travel,
I should say
was one of them or something.
Yeah. There's a bunch of weird ones, but it's like finding a parking spot. I found a parking spot, and that's my OT power. Like, Jesus Christ, you paid $2 million to find a parking spot.
Wow.
I bet every. I was going to say, I bet every real estate company in Los Angeles would be dying to charge people that rate for a parking spot.
That's like my superpower. I have the superpower to be invisible when nobody's looking. It's the greatest superpower ever.
Yeah.
I don't exist when you're not looking at me.
That's how Scientology is. It's hard to imagine, but that's really how it is.
I am amazed. Okay, next question, Steve.
Well, they're still asking, like, how what was literally the final straw that you just said, I have got to get out of this? Because you never really did say what your ultimate final straw was, where you said, I can't do this any longer.
So I had talked to my friend about my story, and my friends, I should say, their husband and wife, and they basically said, why are you even living at home? Just come live with us. That sucks. And I was like, that's really cool. Nobody's ever said that to me before. So I kind of got that sort of made me feel comfortable that, okay, maybe I can share my story with some people online. And if it turns bad, then like I can always go live with them. I have a fallback point. So that sort of gave me that courage, to speak. And then my car got stolen and my dad threatened to send me to jail for it. And I can't even walk you through his thought process that led him to say that to me, but it made me livid and I hung up on him. It was the first, because I was at a friend's house when it happened. And it was the first time I ever really like hung up on my dad. And they kept calling me and I just turned my phone off. And then I turned my phone back on a couple hours later and sure enough, he's calling me still. Like, holy shit. It's the first time I ever really had insight into how crazy like Scientology had made my parents. And then my mom finally called me and like, she's telling me to come home and I can hear my dad screaming in the background. And like, I told her, that's why I don't want to come home, is because of the way he's acting. You can call me when he calms down, then I'll go home. And so he finally calmed down and then we went home to talk about it. And then he started to question me about my sexual history, like who I had sex with, and as if it was related to my car getting stolen. Wow. And I lost it. I mean, I stood up in the middle of a sentence that he was saying and I just went to my room and I locked the door and I didn't say a word, which by the way, before this, I had to lock the door because somebody in the house, I don't know who, was going in my room and reading my mail. And so I just couldn't trust the home alone anymore. So I locked my room. And that was the end of it for me. That whole like conversation, I was like, I can never deal with this again. Like, this is not going to happen ever again.
You see crazy like that, I don't blame you.
Yeah. I mean, it just couldn't, it wouldn't go away.
Somebody had asked, have you ever met David Miscavige? And then do you know where his wife's at?
Thank God, no, I have not met him. I've heard stories of people who met him. I've met people close to him that worked with him on a regular basis, but never him. Whenever he's very like he's not like the Pope that we have now where he'll go wash poor people's feet. He just doesn't want to deal with riffraff. So when he's walking around, everybody disappears. And so I never got to meet him. And his wife, as far as I know, is at a complex in Lake Arrowhead. It's called, it's on Rim of the World Highway.
When's the last time she's been seen?
The Church of Spiritual Technology. Well, there was supposedly a sighting of her like in that local area in the town of Arrowhead, Lake Arrowhead, at a store. She was being followed by two people. She had a resemblance, but she looked like scrawnier, like she hadn't been eating a healthy diet, which is probably true.
Do you think, I hate to put you on the spot here, but do you think there's something, some kind of machinations that have happened to her or something like that, or that Miscavige has some kind of weird thing that he did, or was her evil? Some people question if she's even alive. I'm not. Hey, Scientology's watching. I don't want to go that far.
I know, but I mean, it's questionable. I mean, maybe David Miscavige did kill her. He is known to have a temper. There's plenty of reports of people he's beat up. I've heard stories from people that have been beat up by him, and it's he's pretty brutal. So
why can't they produce her? I mean, how come nobody's even how come there's not a legal thing saying, hey, where is this person?
This gets into now. Well, I kind of can. I kind of can. So as an example, Sheriff Lee Baca, I don't know if you remember him, he's disgraced now, but he used to stand up at Scientology events and speak to Scientologists.
Yeah, I do.
And there's even like the chief of the LAPD has been seen in pictures like shaking hands with Scientologists. So these are the people that went to go question Shelley Miscavige. And nobody even knows if they saw her. It was just that somebody said that she was alive, and so they took it. And so
this is a real life conspiracy theory that's actually not only plausible but probable.
This is the thing. This is the thing.
They need to get into this shit.
This is the thing that makes me crazy. People want to believe, who gives a shit if there was a second shooter in the JFK assassination when like there's child slavery happening in the middle of Los Angeles, right? And the LAPD won't do shit about it.
I mean,
that's a real life thing to worry about.
This is the only time that you will ever hear me say this, but it is disheartening that there actually isn't a hell for people that do this to kids and think they can get away with it. I am genuinely sad that place does not exist, because these are the prime candidates for that. I
gotta tell you, Derrick, this might end up being like my favorite and worst favorite show that we've done so far. For
I appreciate that.
I mean, I'm just, I'm mortified that this shit happens, and I think that people that want to have conspiracy theories, this is the shit that they need to look into, man. Your voice is, you have a very strong voice in this, and I hope that you continue to do so.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I wish Alex Jones would make this the subject of one of his shows.
Fuck off.
I was getting ready to say that.
Fuck Alex Jones.
This needs to be Pizzagate. This needs to be.
Right.
Yeah, fuck Pizzagate. That's bullshit. This is something that legit, man. Wow.
I mean, I made $50 a week when I was working 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, and with that $50 a week, I was expected to buy everything except my 3 meals a day and 4 uniforms, like 4 shirts and sets of pants and stuff like that. That's all I had. And so everything else, my toilet paper, my toothbrush, my toothpaste, any clothes that I want to wear, new shoes, all of it I had to pay for on my $50 a week. Wow. I learned how to live on that. It was crazy.
Well, before we wrap up, you're happier now. I understand you're in a relationship, so that's good.
Yes, yeah.
Does it happen to be with the guy that the guy from Scientology?
No, that would be a sweet happy ending, but no, it's not.
You know what happened? You talk
about there. I was like, oh my god, this is like the Notebook. This is like the Scientology of the Notebook.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no. I actually did email him a long time ago, and last I know, he has a wife and kid now, and he runs some kind of like fireproofing company. Or he was like, it was a family company. I don't know, but he wasn't in the Sea Org anymore.
He has a wife now. You made him straight or something? Or?
I guess so. I guess I was that bad. I don't know.
Is he still in though? Is he still in Scientology?
I mean, he said that he was, but I don't know if he's just like playing by the rules like I was,
You think they love to just go through the motions?
Yeah. I think a lot of them do, just so that they don't people are afraid to upset the status quo, especially in their own lives. We get in our comfort zones and we don't want to get out. And that's a comfort zone, as uncomfortable as it is. They don't realize, I don't think that a lot of, especially second generation and greater Scientologists realize how much more comfortable they can be. You know what I mean? It's scary to step into something you don't know.
Well,
I was going to say earlier, just real quick, sure. Even, for example, the Mastersons, Danny Masterson and his brother, what's his brother's name? I can't remember. And Laura Prepon too. All of those celebrities that are Scientologists are second generation now. They're not capturing new Scientologists anymore. Yeah. These are all people that were raised.
I know. I died when I found out Laura Prepon was a Scientologist, because I love her on that show.
Yeah.
Orange is the New Black, and I was like, how the fuck did she get into that bullshit?
It's so counterintuitive.
My brother lives in WeHo, so I go and visit him every summer. So when I'm out there this summer, we need to get together and have a beer. And
yes.
I'll be down there. I could take a bus right down there, and I'm not that far from LA.
We go to the Abbey and Revolver.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, every time.
Take me to a gay bar. I'm down with it.
I love it down there.
Abbey is the gay bar.
Yeah.
If guys want to sit there and buy me drinks all night and not get any out, that's fine. That's like me and every date that I've ever had with a woman. Buy them drinks and not get anywhere. So, hey,
the Abbey is probably the most straight friendly place in all of WeHo.
Yeah, it's
what? I've been to gay bars. They've always been fine.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very friendly. So
that's the place to go if you're straight.
We try to be.
All the girls.
There you go.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. If you're the only straight guy in a room full of girls.
They're like, we're not that desperate yet, Steve. Okay, drink up.
Well, guys out there, tomorrow at 8:00, debate roulette. Come ready to jump in the conversation. I want to thank Derrick once again for joining us and going through this. This was heartbreaking, fantastic. You were a great guest. You, like Steve said, I'm sure everybody that watches your story is going to be touched, and you deserve to be applauded for that. I'm going to leave it with you to have the last word and kind of give us what your life quote right now would be. Like what kind of gets you through the day. Give us something to end on that way.
Probably one of the most influential like pieces of advice that I ever read in my life is be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle. I mean, I have a messed up story, but there's people out there that have it way worse. And this is something that honestly is a lot easier to solve than world hunger. So I wish people would just solve it. You know what I mean? Like just the FBI may get in a little trouble for raiding them, but they're going to find so much crap that it's going to be worth it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to get people to pay attention to Scientology. But yeah, be kind is also a very important piece of advice to me too. I've taken as well.
Well, we are all better for knowing you now, so I appreciate that. And guys, we'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock for Debate Roulette.
All right, thank you.